fast, where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting new ground in the digital age. From genomic codes to robot facts, we cut through the noise, no holding back. Not your daddy's dairy news tonight. We're sparking debates with every insight. The ring's not where the real fight's at. It's in the data, in the channel chat. From pasture to processor to your morning cup, we're raising the stakes. Try and get ahead of herd. Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd. Come on! The bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome to the Bullvine Podcast, the show where we cut through the noise and get straight to what matters in dairy. I'm your host from the Bullvine, and today we're diving into another hot topic shaping the future of our industry. Whether you're milking cows before sunrise, managing a progressive herd, or just passionate about all things dairy, you're in the right place. So grab your coffee or your favorite milkshake, and let's get started.
Okay, picture this. There's a line item on your dairy farm that, according to one analysis, could be bleeding you $36,740 every single year for every 200 cows you milk.
Wow.
And it's not just the cash going out. It might actually be hurting your butterfat tests. Sounds wild, right?
Yeah.
Especially when we've always thought of that expense as the engine-driving cow visits in robotic systems.
It absolutely flies in the face of conventional wisdom for robotic dairies. I mean, most people think pellets in the robot are non-negotiable.
Right.
But the Bullvine article we're deep diving into today presents some pretty compelling data that seriously challenges that assumption.
It does. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're unpacking a specific article from www.thebullvine.com that takes a hard look at something many robotic dairy operators just accept: the cost and impact of feeding pellets in the robot.
Yeah, our mission today is really to distill the core arguments from this Bullvine article. We'll look at the data, the real-world examples they highlight, really dig into the crucial why, the physiology behind the impact. We'll explore the non-negotiable steps for making this transition, look honestly at who this strategy isn't suited for, and hopefully leave you with practical takeaways you can immediately consider for your own farm.
And the article frames robot pellets not just as a feed cost, but almost like, well, they call them the dairy industry's most expensive security blanket. A bit funny, but maybe true.
Huh, yeah, that's a good line.
So we're going to talk through this like we're having coffee at the feed bunk, examining the numbers, the biology, and asking if clinging to that blanket is costing more than it's worth.
And as you hinted, it's not just the direct cost. The article builds a strong case that the way cows consume pellets in the robot actively works against key performance indicators, particularly component percentages like butterfat.
Okay, let's get right into that problem statement then. The main assertion from the Bullvine article is stark. Robot pellets are an expensive habit. We mentioned that $36,740 figure per 200 cows, which, no matter your scale, isn't pocket change.
Not at all.
Where does the bulk of that number come from?
Well, the largest piece is the feed itself. The article cites research indicating robot pellets carry a premium of roughly $0.23 per pound compared to a well-balanced TMR. When you factor that into a typical feeding scenario for a 200-cow herd, you're looking at roughly $31,500 annually just from the cost difference of the feed delivered in the robot versus feeding it in the bunk.
So over $31,000 is just a direct premium on the feed. Wow. But the article says it's not just about paying more for pellets, it's also costing you on the milk check side.
Exactly. That's the second major point. And arguably, the more insidious cost is the potential harm to component percentages. The physiology section of the article makes a compelling case that feeding pellets in the robot can suppress butterfat levels.
Okay, so the promise, if you follow the path laid out in the article and successfully move away from routine pellet feeding, is pretty significant then. Slash that high feed cost and potentially boost butterfat by 0.2 to 0.4%.
Yeah, that's the potential gain.
That's the route to serious profitability, the article describes.
And importantly, they don't present this as just theory, right? The article is heavily supported by real-world farm examples, showing that producers are successfully implementing this approach and seeing these results.
They really lean on the evidence. Like, take Heeg Bros in Wisconsin. The article points to their operation implying around 450 cows hitting impressive daily numbers. over 48 kilograms of milk per cow, and a 4.55% butterfat test. That's huge.
And how many robot pellets are they feeding?
0.
None. See, that larger operation is a powerful illustration that high production and excellent components are achievable without pellets. But the article also includes smaller examples, mentioned by the University of Gulf Extension, showing it's not just for big herds.
Right, like that 41 cow operation in Ontario, hitting 41 kilograms daily with 3 visits per cow, or the 77 cow Jersey herd at 22 kilograms daily with 2.35 visits.
Right.
These farms are also operating successfully without relying on robot pellets as the primary motivator.
These examples really prove it's a viable management strategy across different sizes and breeds. Combining that confirmed feed cost difference with the potential component upside, the economic argument moves from, interesting theory to proven farm reality.
Okay, let's get into the how. Why would not feeding pellets actually help butterfat? That seems counterintuitive. The article does a great job breaking down the physiology.
It does. The core concept is something they call slug feeding. Basically, this is what happens when a cow stands in the robot and rapidly consumes a concentrated feed like pellets in a short burst.
Like us wolfing down a quick snack versus eating a balanced meal slowly, is that the idea?
Exactly the analogy they use. That rapid intake of readily fermentable carbohydrates causes a sudden, significant drop in rumen pH. The article references research like from UC Davis Veterinary Medicine, explaining how these pH crashes cause a dramatic shift in the microbial populations within the rumen.
And that microbial shift disrupts butterfat production. Is that the link?
Precisely. The bacteria that thrive in a higher, more stable pH environment, those are the ones that efficiently digest fiber and produce acetate. And acetate is the primary building block for butterfat. So when pH drops, those beneficial fiber digesters are suppressed, and you get a proliferation of acid-producing microbes instead. This also significantly increases the risk of SARA, subacute ruminal acidosis.
Which is the last thing you want for herd health and production.
Absolutely. The article, backing it with USDA ARS research, links this physiological reality directly to that observed 0.4% butterfat increase seen on farms that successfully transition away from pellet slug feeding. It's not magic, it's just...
Well, it's allowing basic rumen function to operate more consistently, supported by a steady intake of well-mixed TMR from the bunk.
And quantifying that butterfat increase really seals the deal economically. A 0.4% bump can add over $10,000 annually for a 200-cow herd at current component prices. So you're not just cutting costs, you're enhancing revenue. It significantly strengthens the economic case. However, and this is a big however, the Bullvine article is brutally honest. This is not a simple switch.
Right.
They outline 3 absolutely critical things you must get right, and they note that many farms fail spectacularly on one or more of these pillars.
Okay, let's look at those non-negotiables. The first one sounds like it's literally cast in concrete. Pillar 1.
Pillar 1, barn layout is king. The article is unequivocal. You cannot just pull pellets in a free-flow barn and expect success. It will fail. Hard.
Really? Why so definitive?
They cite Michigan State University research showing free-flow barns need 3.2 times more pellets than guided traffic systems just to maintain robot visits.
Oh, 3 times more.
Yeah.
Because without the layout pushing them towards the robot, there's no motivation once the pellet reward is gone.
Precisely. Guided flow systems are essential because they use gates and alleyways to direct cows, basically forcing them through the robot path as the most convenient way to access the feed bunk or return to their pens.
So the layout becomes the incentive.
Right. This structural guidance replaces the pellet incentive as the primary motivator for robot visits. The article specifies the key requirements: short return alleys back to feed, less than 75 meters ideally, functional pre-selection gates, and absolutely zero ability for cows to backtrack around the robot.
Even experienced farms like Heeg Bros had a learning curve on this, apparently. Kelly Hutchings from Delaval mentions their first group of cows trying to bypass the robots initially.
Yeah.
It just underscores how the physical environment must support the behavior you want.
It really highlights that your layout is the foundation.
Yeah.
If that's not right, the rest won't matter. Pillar 2 is the one the article suggests trips up most farms.
Ah, the legendary TMR quality. I had a feeling this was coming.
Yes. The article is incredibly direct here. Your TMR must be freaking amazing and consistent. That's the quote.
Freaking amazing.
But they describe it as requiring obsessive attention to details.
Mm-hmm.
Farms that succeed here are absolutely fanatical about their TMR.
They even provide specific non-negotiable parameters, right?
Yeah.
Like numbers.
They do, pulling from sources like UW-Madison Dairy Science. We're talking physical consistency day to day with less than 3% variation. That means it looks and feels the same every single day.
Less than 3% variation, that's tight.
It is. Minimum NDF digestibility of 65%. Feed pushed up at least 8 times daily. Moisture levels kept tight between 46-52% to minimize sorting. Daily variation in critical nutrients kept under 2%. And consistent particle length distribution with less than 5% variation in key particle sizes.
That level of consistency sounds incredibly challenging to achieve on a working farm, day in, day out. How are farms actually managing that?
Well, that's where the obsessive attention comes in. It means rigorous feed delivery protocols, regular mixer wagon audits using tools like that UW-Madison one they mentioned, strict moisture checks on silages, monitoring particle separation at the bunk constantly.
So it's constant vigilance.
It really is. The article emphasizes that this isn't just about nutrition, it's about creating a physically consistent, palatable feed that cows cannot easily sort. If your cows can pick through the TMR like a kid leaving vegetables on a dinner plate within an hour or two of it being delivered.
Yeah.
The article's blunt assessment is you're not ready for pellet-free milking. Full stop.
Ouch. That kid's dinner plate analogy really paints a picture, though.
It does, and the sensitivity is real. There's a quote from Fred Van Lith that's eye-opening. Skip one push-up, you'll see 18% fewer robot visits by dinner.
18% fewer visits from missing one push-up. Wow.
That shows how critical constant access to this consistent, unsorted TMR is, because it becomes the primary driver for the cow to spend time near the robot area. They do mention using palatability enhancers like molasses during the transition phase can be helpful, just to encourage that initial TMR consumption.
Okay, so we need the right layout and absolutely perfect TMR. What's the third piece, pillar 3?
Pillar 3 is the shift in labor focus. And the article tackles the potentially uncomfortable reality here. This isn't necessarily less work, at least initially, it's different work.
So you're trading one kind of work for another.
Pretty much. You're shifting effort from managing complex pellet feeding tables in the robot software to intensive cow observation and fetch protocols.
The article quantifies that too, suggesting fetch labor might increase from around 1.2 to maybe 1.9 hours daily for a 200 cow herd.
Yeah.
That's an additional labor cost, right? Estimated around $8,760 annually based on some Vita Plus loyal data they cited.
It's important to acknowledge that cost, absolutely. But the article points out the net economic benefit from feed savings and component gains still far outweighs it. The crucial element here isn't just the time, it's the discipline.
Discipline and fetching.
Total discipline. Implementing absolutely strict, consistent fetch protocols like checking every cow over 10 hours since last milking and fetching them immediately with no exceptions ever is non-negotiable. The article warns that inconsistent fetching is one of the fastest ways to derail the entire system.
Okay, for many farms, consistent labor and sticking to protocols are already huge challenges. How do farms successfully navigate that labor shift and ensure that discipline? Seems like a management hurdle.
It is a significant management hurdle, and the article implies it requires serious buy-in and training for the whole team. The experience of Matt Strickland in California is illustrative here. He took a very gradual approach, phasing down pellets over an entire year.
Oh, year.
Yeah, and even now, he still has about 7 cows who receive a minimal pellet allocation because that's what works best for them individually. His perspective is key. I didn't invest in robots to feed my cows. I got the robots to milk my cows.
That's a great quote.
It shows patience pays off, and the goal isn't necessarily 100% zero pellets for every single cow, but finding the optimal allocation for each operation's specific conditions, as Dr. Bill Weiss from OSU suggests. It brings in that nuance.
Yeah, that perspective from Dr. Weiss is important. It's about optimization, not just elimination for the sake of it. Okay, let's circle back to the dollars and cents. The article provides a summary of the math. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. It basically confirms the significant economic difference we talked about. For that 200 cow herd example, the estimated $36,740 net annual difference comes from roughly $3,500 in feed cost savings,
right,
offset by about $8,760 in increased fetch labor,
right,
plus over $10,400 gained from just a 0.2% butterfat bump.
Wow.
And an estimated $3,600 saved on wasted robot feed. It really crystallizes where the savings and gains come from.
And there was that Vita Plus loyal survey cited in the article, looking at 32 robotic herds. That seemed to back up this counterintuitive idea too.
It did. That survey showed that high robot pellet costs actually hurt income over feed cost and even negatively impacted milk production per visit, which is not what you'd expect.
No.
What's particularly interesting is the survey found the herds with the highest income over feed cost were often either feeding very low-cost pellets or focusing on nutrient-dense PMRs with less reliance on the robot feeder, exactly the nutritional shift this pellet-free strategy achieves.
So the data seems to be challenging the traditional thinking.
It really does. It's powerful data suggesting the traditional approach isn't always the most profitable.
It's a strong case, but the article is balanced enough to say this isn't a magic bullet for everyone, right?
Yeah.
There are situations where maintaining pellets still makes sense.
Absolutely. It stresses this isn't some ideological movement. It's a profitability strategy, and it might not fit your specific farm. The article is clear on the scenarios where pellets might still be necessary or beneficial.
Top of that list has to be the free flow barns we already mentioned.
Unquestionably. The MSU research is pretty definitive. They need 3.2 times more pellets just to function. Trying to go pellet-free in a free-flow system is likely doomed to fail.
Okay. What about those elite, high genetic cows pushing the limits? Does it work for them?
That's a key exception. The article includes perspectives from experts like Dr. Michael Overton at the University of Georgia. He argues that very high-producing, high-genetic merit herds might actually metabolically benefit from the targeted nutrient delivery pellets provided during milking.
So for those top cows, the pellets might still be worth it.
Potentially. For these animals, where every gram of energy counts, strategic, consistent pellet allocation might outweigh the potential rumen disturbance risk, especially if the TMR quality is already absolutely top tier to begin with.
And the article also mentions supporting transition cows, keeping pellets for them.
Yes, drawing on insights from Dr. Stephen LeBlanc at the University of Guelph. He highlights that fresh cows, particularly in the first 10 days or so postpartum, show measurable metabolic advantages from receiving supplemental energy via the robot. So a modest pellet allocation during that critical early lactation phase could still be beneficial.
It brings us back to that point about optimal allocation versus total elimination for every single cow. Reinforcing that nuance is key based on the cow, the phase of lactation, and the farm setup.
Exactly. It's not about a rigid rule, but about making data-driven decisions for your operation. And for those producers who look at the data and think this might be for them, the article lays out a practical, structured 90-day game plan.
Okay, a 90-day plan. Walk us through those first steps. Phase 1.
Phase 1, reality check weeks 1 to 4. Before changing anything, get data. Put pH sensors on about 10% of your herd to establish a baseline for rumen health and stability. Audit your TMR consistency rigorously using a shaker box or similar tool. The article says if your day-to-day variation is over 5%, fix that first before even thinking about pulling pellets.
Okay, TMR first. What else?
Identify your pellet junkie. Cows those getting high amounts that will be hardest to transition. Double-check your guided traffic system is functioning perfectly, especially selection gates, and meticulously document your baseline production, component tests, and health metrics. Get your starting point clear.
That initial phase sounds crucial for identifying roadblocks and assessing if you're even ready to try this.
It is. It tells you whether you have fundamental TMR or rumen health issues to address first. Then, phase 2, weeks 5-12, is the wean. This is the actual transition phase.
The tricky part.
Right. Gradually reduce pellet allocations, aiming for about 5% reduction per week. Consider using molasses or other palatability enhancers in the TMR during this phase to keep intake high. Daily pH checks are vital. If you see cows spending more than 2 hours below 5.8 pH consistently, you may need to slow down or reassess your TMR.
And this is where that labor shift really kicks in, right? The fetching.
Absolutely. You must implement strict, consistent fetch protocols. Every cow over 10 hours since last milking gets fetched, no exceptions, every time. Track incomplete milkings, kickoffs from the robot, and milk flow rates closely. These are your early warning signs. And critically, increase your TMR push-ups by at least 25% during this phase to ensure constant access.
The article mentions this can be a year-long process like Matt Strickland's experience, but also that fresh cows adapt faster, maybe 40% quicker.
That flexibility is important. You could start with a smaller group or just your fresh cows to test the waters, Then, phase 3, month 4 and beyond, is show me the money. If the first 2 phases were executed with discipline, this is where you start seeing the results pay off.
What metrics indicate success? What should you be looking for?
Rumen pH stabilizing in that desired 6.0, 6.5 range is a key indicator. You should see butterfat tests starting to lift, often by that 0.2% mark around week 12. Fetch rates should be dropping significantly below 5% of the herd by week 10 ideally, as cows habituate to the TMR motivation. Look for dramatically reduced feeds sorting at the bunk and more consistent manure. Your key performance indicators become robot visit frequency stabilizing above, say, 2.4 visits per cow daily, and those clear improvements in component percentages.
And your management focus shifts permanently at this point.
Absolutely. TMR quality and feed push-up frequency are no longer just important. They become your two most critical management points. They essentially replace the complexity of managing multiple robot feed tables.
Now, the article also gives us a sense that this trend isn't just a North American phenomenon. It's happening elsewhere.
That's right. The pellet-free or reduced pellet movement seems to be global, often driven by slightly different factors. In the Netherlands, for instance, Wageningen University research points to herds seeing 15% lower vet costs post-transition, largely attributed to improved rumen health and reduced sera.
And in Europe, environmental regulations are playing a role too.
They are. EU methane regulations link methane emissions to rumen health. Reduced sera translates to less methane, potentially saving European farmers around 120 herds per cow annually in compliance costs alone. So it aligns environmental incentives with profitability.
Interesting. What about New Zealand with its pasture systems? How does it apply there?
Yeah, James Robertson, a farmer there, discussed implementing a seasonal hybrid model. They eliminate robot pellets entirely during peak grass growing seasons, capturing a reported 17% feed cost reduction in that period with no impact on production. It shows the adaptability of the core principle.
Even in challenging climates like Israel, they're doing this.
Apparently so. Despite significant heat stress, farms there have successfully transitioned. Dr. El Sarusi from the Agricultural Research Organization suggests that the stable rumen function achieved with consistent TMR feeding actually helps cows better cope with heat stress, adding another unexpected benefit.
And looking ahead, is this changing the industry? Are equipment manufacturers thinking about this shift?
The article hints strongly in this. Industry whispers suggest major robot manufacturers are starting to view pellet delivery as potentially an optional feature on future models rather than central to the design. Carlos Pereira from Lilly is quoted acknowledging that while their systems were designed with pellets in mind, they see farms succeeding without them.
So they're adapting.
It seems so, implying a shift towards potentially minimal allocation being optimal for some, rather than high rates being the default.
That could definitely impact future robot installations, maybe lower costs or simplify things.
It could. The article also notes the emergence of specialized consultants focusing on helping farms transition to these TMR-based motivation systems, indicating professional support is growing. And those regulatory drivers we mentioned in Europe could eventually influence practices elsewhere,
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, we've covered a lot of compelling points for reducing or eliminating pellets, but it's worth revisiting that nuance again. Not everyone agrees this is the universal best approach, right?
That's an important point the article includes. Experts like Dr. Thomas Overton at Cornell still emphasize the potential value of targeted nutrient delivery via pellets, especially for those very high-producing early lactation animals. They argue it can provide metabolic support difficult to achieve solely through the TMR.
So there's still a case for pellets in specific situations.
Yes. And Dr. Bill Weiss at Ohio State champions that middle ground we touched on.
Right.
He advocates for finding the optimal pellet allocation for each specific farm and set of cows, rather than a strict all-or-nothing approach. These perspectives are valuable reminders that it's complex, and the decision really depends on your unique farm circumstances, genetics, and management capabilities.
So wrapping all this up, the Bovine article's conclusion for you, the listener, is pretty direct, isn't it?
It is. The data from farms operating this way, from Wisconsin to the Netherlands, is mounting. The article presents it almost as essential profit physics. You essentially have a choice. Continue accepting that estimated $36,740 annual cost per 200 cows for robot pellets.
Which is a lot.
It is. Or make the upfront investment in management discipline, which they estimate at roughly 120 hours of intensive training and oversight during the transition for a 200-cow herd for potentially significant perpetual savings and improved performance.
And the article's core message seems to be that success hinges entirely on that management discipline, particularly around TMR quality and fetching. And that idea that cows don't miss what they never had when it comes to the pellet habit.
It's a powerful thought and a key mindset shift, I think. The big takeaways are clear. The economic impact is potentially massive. That $36,740 net savings figure, driven by feed savings, offset slightly by labor, but boosted significantly by components. The technical requirements are strict. Guided flow is mandatory. TMR must be held to incredibly high specific standards with frequent push-ups.
The physiological benefits are real. Stable rumen pH leading to potentially improved butterfat.
And the implementation requires a structured plan. That 90-day protocol is a roadmap, acknowledging the initial labor spike but showing how fetch rates and components should improve over that period.
And crucially, knowing when not to attempt it if you have a free-flow barn, cannot achieve or maintain amazing TMR consistency, or struggle with labor discipline, this probably isn't for you right now.
Exactly. This deep dive really highlights that while challenging, rethinking routine robot pellet feeding presents a significant opportunity backed by solid data and an understanding of cow physiology.
So based on everything in this bovine article, what are some immediate practical steps you listening can take?
Yeah.
The article leaves us with 3 things you can do starting, well, right now.
Step 1, today. Download that free UW-Madison mixer evaluation toolkit the article mentions and audit your TMR consistency. Just find out where you stand. It's a good first step regardless.
Step 2, maybe this month. Select 5 cows, maybe average ones, maybe some high producers, and get some rumen pH monitoring probes in to see your baseline rumen health dynamics. Get some real numbers.
And step 3, perhaps this year. If those initial reality checks look good and your physical infrastructure and management foundation are solid, start planning a phased pellet reduction using the 90-day protocol described in the article. But don't rush it. Take your time.
Good advice. The bovine article leaves us with a provocative thought to chew on. The revolution's happening whether we like it or not. The question is, will you lead it or chase it?
It definitely gives you a clear data-backed direction if you choose to lead, something to think about.
We strongly encourage you to read the full article on www.thebulvine.com. It contains all the detailed charts, data, and expert quotes we discussed that really bring this whole topic to life.
Absolutely worth the read. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into robot feeding strategies.
We'll catch you on the next one.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Bovine Podcast. Thanks for tuning in and being part of our forward-thinking dairy community. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the episode with your fellow dairy enthusiasts. Got a burning question or a topic you want us to tackle next? Drop us a line at the Bovine. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo and striving for excellence, because at the Bovine, we're all about revolutionizing dairy one story at a time.